Okay, I'm level 88, and with our spoiler-safe format, of course, it is time to talk. Because, holy shit, Endwalker. They've went in a really ballsy direction with how they are doing this expansion, and quite frankly, I think it's kind of shocking that they've managed to do such a good job at it. Where I last left off, I was loving Zone 3. I mean, come on. The duty. I mean, there's a few of them, they're all pretty good. The characterizations, you know, what they get into there, it is wonderful, and even with all of the crazy, you know, fantasy elements, they're of course still managing to keep things super grounded and just remarkably human. So that's where I was in the last video, absolutely loving that stuff. But as you who are ahead of me know, since then, whoa. So I've done the first trial, I've done another dungeon, I've went to places. I had no idea whatsoever I was going to. And I am so happy that I didn't look at, say, the Free Company page to know the zone names of where my, where everyone was. Because this was all a complete surprise to me. And it's the sort of thing, if you told somebody about where this expansion goes and what happens, I think they'd just say, oh, they've jumped the shark. But no, because much like how Shadowbringers worked off incredibly well-established material that was slowly built up to, so too does Endwalker manage to do incredible, crazy things, but never have it feel immersion-breaking. And then with that craziness, they're just able to have such a cool story. And it's really that immersion, that deep immersion that is key. And lately, I've got to admit, my hand's been pretty immersed with Boxu, the place where you can get a slice of Japan each month and 10% off up to $47 with my link down below. Now, their boxes give you a real fun journey through top-notch Japanese snacking. Like, these literally ship from Japan and they even partner with local snack makers to make unique custom treats. It's a perfect gift, and might be an even bigger gift because you may even win tickets to Japan. Boxu are giving away a set to anyone who is subscribed to them before the end of December. Now, this month, it's the Hokkaido Holidays box. Of course, the treats inside box are long gone since we last talked about it. The things though, mochi puffs, I love them. I love them. They're light as air. They're full of flavor. It's crazy. There's then, of course, the continuation of the interesting popcorn. This time, it's butter soy sauce. Really good. Also, wasabi crackers. Can't get enough of that. And corn tea, which is something I never tried before, but was very, very pleasant indeed. And of course, way more things. So to get your own slice of Japan and have some fun snacking and 10% off, hit up my link down below. They're a bunch of fun and it's stuff you've probably never tasted before. So thanks Boxu, check them out and let's go. Alright, the spoiler-free section of the video. Don't worry, we're only going to exit the spoiler-free section with a bunch of time and very clear warnings, so you're 100% safe. Right then, I think the first thing I've got to say is the damn quality of execution is still so strong as I've been going through. They've hit all of their big high moments, and just their ability to use everything they have at their disposal, you know, their acting, the camera, which they're getting a lot better with. It's all just fantastic. And I do have a quick little tip for you here. So I hide my UI when I'm in voiced cinematics. Obviously, I have the auto advancing turned on. I then just hide the UI. Because at this stage, their lip syncing is actually good enough to do the job, and I really do feel that it is a lot more cinematic when you don't have the text box at the bottom. Because here's the thing about the human eye, if a little box pops up and starts moving, your eye's going to be drawn down to it. And I find that sometimes takes me away from the cinematic. So by hiding that UI, obviously you've got to listen to the little audio cue for if, you know, your character's got to respond to something. But I've really found that to actually help with the cinematic experience. So there you go, that's a tip. Pacing then. So I have heard some people criticize the pacing of Endwalker, maybe thinking it's a bit padded out. If you're ahead of me, or you've played up to what I've played in this video, I'm level 88 as I said, you'll probably know the sections that people are talking about. And as I said in the previous video, I did find the first jaunt into Thavnir to be pretty slow, in a way where I do think it could be maybe a bit tighter, but again, I can see why they did that. Now, as for the next two bits that I see people commonly say are slow, I do just disagree. And I'm not going to say what those places are because I do feel that the zone names are spoilers. But to me, no, that is the pacing in between high points that builds a lot of the world, builds a lot of character, and to be honest, that's a lot of what I'm really here for, especially because I've been getting way deeper into the lore. After the end of Shadowbringers, I think, well, I mean, just about everybody's a bit more deep into the lore, right? It's just so damn interesting. You're thinking about who your character is in this overall universe. And with those thoughts in my head, I certainly found those slow bits to be anything but. I did find them to be rather engrossing. And I really love how some of those slower bits actually were a bit lighthearted sometimes. I thought that was just really good for our characters, especially considering how much darkness is actually going around in this storyline and how dire the overall, situation is. I mean, it's called Endwalker for good reason. We fuck it up and it kind of is the end. So I'm very happy with the pacing. I think that those slower bits are totally justified, and the high points that they lead to in my experience so far are just absolutely incredible. Then the next thing is the narrative. Obviously, no spoilers right now, but I am truly surprised with how they have done it. They played their cards close to their chest in all of the marketing for this expansion. All I can say is that my initial expectation for this expansion was we'd get a bunch of new areas on Eorzea, and maybe the moon would be the final zone. Maybe it'll be like Dragon's Dogma, the original plan for that, where you do all your things and you fight the last boss on the moon, and then job's good and you're done. So there could have been a more predictable way to do this expansion, but no, they've been daring, they've been ballsy, they've done genuinely interesting things. They have taken me to places on this adventure that I did not expect to go to, and that has been very memorable and very appreciated. Now, just a little bit on the content. Trial 1. Trial 1 is great. Now, if you see any footage of me doing Trial 1, you maybe notice I'm playing awfully. I mean, yeah, that happens when you're playing. It's pretty late, but what a cool trial. It's that usual thing with Final Fantasy XIV, really. The first time you go there and you don't know the mechanics, you're anxious, you're looking around, you're like, fuck, what's going to happen? I don't know. But after one or two wipes, you just end up in a situation where you can very clearly, very visually read and understand the fight. You don't feel like you need boss timers or weak auras or those things that, say, as a World of Warcraft raider, I'm very used to. So this idea of going into a trial, blind, no add-ons, no guide, I really love it. And it's a pretty special experience doing that just with other players. And we're all there experiencing Trial 1 together for the first time. And it really taught me that because this is a norm within Final Fantasy, doing the dungeons in a way where, you mess up the mechanics, you die. That's how it goes. You mess up the mechanics in the trial, you die. And everyone has to go through this. And I think that has really created a player base that's actually able to read and intuitively understand mechanics. I've consistently found this, and I was thinking to myself as I was going through the past expansions, everyone knows these fights. It's going to be, maybe it'll be just like WoW LFR when I go into Endwalker. And no, doing Trial 1 with almost everyone there being new, we muddled through it in no time. We all had a great time. The chat was just full of excited, happy people. And it just showed to me, like, wow, having a one-off 8-player, or, having these 8-player boss fights with, not humongous difficulty, but very clear and readable difficulty with clear consequences, that's just fantastic. And another thing, too, is that they massively reduce the frustration via an extremely, I'd say, very liberal combat res situation. I'm very used to a game where, you only really have so many combat reses in a fight, and, tough shit. But with this, there's obviously penalties to being rezzed in combat, a whole bunch in a row, and certainly I had all my times, I get my res, I try to choose my moment to accept my res, I accept my res, and guess what happens? I spawn immediately into a mechanic and instantly die and feel like a big jackass. But I think what that means is you can do a fair amount of failure within one of these fights while it's still feeling like a threatening challenge. And I think that basically means that it's a better learning environment. Now, I've got to imagine that in the higher and higher difficulties, what happens is the penalties of constantly being rezzed will mean that you won't really be viable to actually complete the fight. But for this initial difficulty mode, it seems like perfectly balanced with a liberal enough combat res system that it just allows people to have a bunch of fun, really enjoy the spectacle, actually have mechanics that will kill them, but enough of a safety net that they can get rezzed again and continue the fight. And when it happens like that, I think that just means that it's a better learning environment. And I really feel like I've seen that in the game. Okay, spoiler-free opinions are done now. So I'm just going to sort of talk to the camera for maybe, 5 to 10 seconds in total, waste some time, kill some time, so that if you don't want the spoilers, you've got ample time to filter your way out of this video. And with that done, I dearly do hope you've clicked off the video, because in 3, in 2, in 1, we are now in spoiler territory. So who thought the moon would be the final zone then, instead of the 4th zone, right? And who thought that Big Fan Daniel would have that storyline? And I mean, I don't even know what's going on with Xenos. He's going to appear again, but holy shit. So obviously where I ended, I just finished Tower of Babel, and then immediately from there, Hydaelyn hops into Kryl, and zoom, you're off to the moon. And in the moon, you're like, okay, you see this Watcher fella, you see him. You learn about all of this, a bit more of the Zodiark lore, which is of course absolutely a treat in itself. And
then a dog that looks like a freaking competition dog in how, groomed and everything it is appears. The dog is called Argos. And you're like, what? What's going on? Then, you think you're up there to stop Big Danny. No, you're not. Fan Daniel wins. And Fan Daniel's such an interestingly narratively designed character, actually, because for a lot of the time we're like, Fan Daniel, he's just a big nihilistic drama queen, wants to end it all, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And it's that thing where, to me, it's like Fan Daniel didn't seem like the most sort of deep and interesting villain, but he was fun. And to be honest, I basically felt the same thing about Xenos. Now, in that dinner scene that I talked about in the previous video, that doesn't elevate those characters from those two opinions that I had, but it certainly did just give them a level of showmanship that was really fun and exciting. And then when it came to Trial 1, which of course is Zodiark, that's when you just kind of think, oh, okay, that's Fan Daniel's plan. And for a bit, you just kind of think, oh, is that Fan Daniel done then? What a weird guy. What a weird villain. But then, of course, I'm level 88, so you know what's happened, right? With that experience where you get to learn a little bit more there. And I really think they could have ended up doing that thing with Fan Daniel where they sacrifice most of the character screen time to make the very end interesting. I think that could have happened, but I think he was generally enjoyable enough while he was on screen that then getting the extra depth in the moments in a section I'm going to talk about very shortly, where of course you go back to Elpis. That's just a very interesting way to design the narrative. It could have failed. I really don't think it did though, and I found it to be highly engaging. But then of course Zodiark, I mean, you would have thought the Zodiark would have been later on. And what blew my mind is when you're fighting, is it Titiana? The Fae King. That's like the same point in Shadowbringers as the Zodiark fight in Endwalker, and that blew my mind a bit. So I've already talked about the fight. I thought the fight was awesome, but of course what actually happens there. I mean, you've got all your cool moments, like, you using the little constellation stone, summoning, everyone in. That's all quite nice. But then Fan Daniel, he's got control of Zodiark. You beat him, and true to his word, tears it out. Dead. No more Zodiark. And that, of course, means that, Zodiark's function is no longer being performed, which, of course, means he starts the end times. Didn't think the end times would start like that, to be honest. So that was just a neat way of playing around with people's expectations. I think most people probably thought Zodiark would be a boss fight, but they probably thought the Zodiark would be, like, way later on into this expansion, but no. So, I mean, an incredible fight, incredible spectacle, and lore where I was just sitting there being like, holy shit, what are they doing? This is interesting. This is not what I expected, and in a good way. And then it's rabbit time.
we meet the rabbits, the beast tribe in the moon. And this is where, certainly to my personal preferences, I love that whole thing. Number one, Urianger, big uber danger. I just love any stories where people are like, Urianger usually has really good plans, but he's a bit secretive right now and we're kind of suspicious and worried, so let's find out what's going on. That's kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but this lore that basically there's a bunch of rabbits on the moon and they've been turning the moon into basically, you know, like a spaceship, a escape vessel for everyone of the planet. And, you know, if you just said to somebody at the start of ARR that that's what was going on, I mean, they might think about, you know, Dalibut and everything, be like, an artificial moon, I guess that could happen. But I think you'd still think it's pretty wacky that our saviors are a bunch of technological moon rabbits. And I think the thing for me is, you know, I love Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You know, especially the original, which is the radio play, the book stuff came after. And I just love Hitchhiker's Guide. And there was something about that whole sequence that just totally made me feel like there was this Douglas Adams-ish just vibe, you know? So I just loved the way that they, you know, that they were kind of misreading us, the way that they were, you know, they just had their purpose so clear, but also they were so detached. I just thought there was a lot of like really natural, just natural humor to them. And then also, I mean, interesting lore, and that you could say it's inherently a bit selfish if we just piss off on the moon and, you know, leave the end time to be the end time. And if that means the end of the source, obviously that means the end of all of the reflections. And now, you know, because of Shadowbringers, that's a lot of characters that we really, really do care about so much. So I love that segment in the moon. And I also thought that it was just, it had some of the, you know, it was interesting lore. It was a bit more lighthearted. There was even a little bit of comedy in there, but it didn't feel out of place. And to me, it was just a lovely break in pace. Because obviously, the next thing that happens is, you know, Sharlayan in the end times. So there are things to talk about there. I mean, when you get back to Thavnir for the second time, that's where I just love Thavnir, frankly. Vritra is just a really great character. And the whole thing between Vritra and the, I suppose, the acting satrap, I just thought that it's like not the most complex thing in the world. I just thought it was really well done, as everybody's trying to convince Vritra to, you know, actually sort of, you know, well, acknowledge himself to his people, really. Of course, the way that his, I suppose technically in a way, predecessor goes is, it's just, I guess it's a strong scene. And there's so many little micro scenes here where, you know, understanding that basically it's all down to Dynamis, and, you know, people's emotions and all of that. There's just a lot of tragedy, and there's a lot of really grim stuff that is sad. Right, I mean, especially as you and the twins are just going around trying to save people desperately as this horrible, horrible situation is unfolding. And I mean, the creature designs, the music, the whole thing. And then, of course, that dungeon as well. I mean, even, you know, that boss where, isn't it like it's like a family or whatever. And, you know, they lose control of their emotions and what happens. And you're just like, that's rough. Then, of course, you get to the bit in Thavnir 2 where it is the in-game version of what's shown in the cinematic. You know, where, like, Alzay gets hurt, you, of course, jump in to save the child. And, you know, even that, you get back to the village, and it's some grim stuff. But what I love is, you know, they still get that message of hope and all of that out in a way that doesn't feel cheesy. It feels very genuine, given the horrific things that our characters have seen. So just with Thavnir 2, I mean, it's got the character work. It's got things that are genuinely a bit, yeah, they're just sad to watch, really. The lore of it all is fascinating as you're working out, well, what will eventually be known to you as Dynamis. I love it. And then, of course, the other side of this is you return to Sharlayan and you work out that, oh yeah, Sharlayan have actually known this has been coming for like 200 odd years. They've been preparing all this stuff, and they've been shipping things to the moon so the rabbits know what to do. Whoa! Right? So that does make, I was about to call him Four Cheese, which is, no, that's an in-joke, that would make sense to you. Fortuno, Lavier even. You know, you sort of start to realize what he's really about. I mean, what a twat. I still want to slap him. Still want to slap him because he's mean to the twins, and goddamn, the twins must be protected at all costs. But again, that's just really interesting lore, actually. I love the lore of this game. I love the world building, and frankly, I'm very interested to see where it goes with Charlian, because their goals and our goals are not well aligned, and perhaps even Heidelin's goals. Because that whole escape the planet thing is sort of Heidelin's plan with the moon. Charlian's on side with that, but we obviously don't want to lose all of our friends in the first. And then, of course, we have got to talk about our travel back in time. Bloody hell, how cool. And just how cool that they actually pulled off such a, like, high concept, crazy ass thing, right? I mean, it's just so neat. And of course, with Elidibus giving us our send-off at obviously great personal cost to him, even going there is a touching moment. And I mean, it's like any time they play that Flames of Truth, you know, the Louis Soir music, you're like, shit's going on. This is going to be big. And big it is, because of course, all these characters take a look at you. They realize, oh, your soul is 9/14 of Azim, or Azim, I forget exactly which. Now, of course, that's the thing. So the characters of Hythlodaeus, Emmet Selk, and Vana, they recognize you because your soul is, of course, 9/14 of their friend. Their friend who, you know, I suppose has the seat of Azim, or Azim, but we, of course, never meet that character. The whole sundering thing is very interesting indeed. But here it all just is so much more interesting and engaging because we're just dealing with these characters. And especially seeing Hythlodaeus is just great. You know, from seeing the little shades of him that we had previously. And it really just shows you that relationship between him and Emmet Selk. And that's the really nice thing. Emmet Selk's, I mean, I get why he is one of the most popular, maybe probably the most popular villain in the whole of FF14. And it's just that way you get to know him. And by the very end, and of course, you know, his wish that we remember him, kind of, you know, just knowing that whenever he brought his vision, his memory of Amarot back, that Hythlodaeus is there. And all those times between that and 5.3 that we see Hythlodaeus now actually getting to see the actual man in the flesh is, it's just a really, really strong moment. It really is. I love how they did it. And to jump to the very end of this whole segment of the questing, you know, when just seeing Emmet Selk and Hythlodaeus work together on a plan with basically just completely non-verbal communication because they know each other well. They know what to do. It was just a real neat moment. A really, really neat moment. I loved it. I quite frankly loved it. Then, of course, there's Meteon and Hermes. You know, Fandaniel, a lot of people are just like, Fandaniel, drama queen, big nihilist. Right, we get it. You don't like existing. Okay. That's how he could sort of feel in those bits of Shadowbringers that, you know, we saw him, but we didn't fully get into him. And it's a very interesting, and I've got to say, very ballsy and daring way to do this character, where we experience, well, from our perspective, his final folly as Fandaniel, you know, with Xenos, right? We experience that Zodiarch. And then we kind of get to see where he started. And it reminds me very much of something. I mean, here's an example. I'm sure loads of people watched the movie, and I've bring this up a few times recently, but they've watched Sixth Sense already knowing the twist, and it's still quite enjoyable. And I remember seeing some research on how it's actually, if you have the end of a book spoiled for you, people actually sometimes even enjoy reading the book more after they've had it spoiled. It sounds counterintuitive, but I think that's just because there's something in knowing where it goes and discovering how it got there that is very satisfying. And with the characterization of Hermes, who of course would go to the seat of Fandaniel, we really get that. So knowing how he ended up, knowing what he did before that, and then getting to actually experience his character struggles. And that's the thing, because with him in Meteon, you spend almost all of your time questing here really empathizing with him, feeling his sorrow as he, you know, deals with the more grisly part of his job. And you get into that deep despair, I suppose, that permeates that character. And then, of course, via that permeates Medion. Where he's this individual's trying to work out, to what end? Feels a deep depression at what the Medion project reveals for all of the other civilizations out there. It almost reminds me, not exactly, but if you've ever watched the show Battlestar Galactica, you'll know there's a bit in that where there's a thing that's been very hyped up to all of our characters as, I won't spoil, but, they get there, it's not what they expect in a way that is slightly similar to, what Fan Daniel ends up learning from the Medion project. And it's just that feeling of the deep despair and depression that comes forth from that. So I just thought, the end of that dungeon, it's an incredible sequence. The tension is really strong. It's, again, whenever they want to do a high point in their story, when they want to increase the pace, they just nail it. And then, as things go on, you meeting you and Vana, that's one of my favorite sequences, really. Just the whole thing. Before the dungeon, after the dungeon, whatever. Because obviously she becomes Heidelin. That's where her story goes. And actually getting to see that, and I have a lot of questions. Very interested. What is the continuation of consciousness between Vana and Heidelin? Whenever I suppose, isn't it that Vana basically sacrifices herself to become the heart of Heidelin? So Heidelin kind of comes forth from her. And then obviously that has me thinking about all of the primal lore, especially, say, Louisoix and Phoenix, as an example. And then that even gets me thinking about this character, and I'm like, well, okay, Vana, we get along great with her. It's just, the time you spend with her is fantastic. The really fun Judy. We are, people of different times, each facing our own final days. How we deal with that, and then trying to work out that, well, her solution ultimately is going to be become Heidelin, keep Zodiark essentially in stasis, and then, greatly suspend the final days. Ideally, indefinitely suspend the final days in order to save the star. But she obviously has a backup plan. And that backup plan is our rabbit friends, who are obviously a joy to be around. But we care about everyone in the first. So I know that is a backup plan that obviously those of Sharlayan found out about and are aiding. But what's going to happen when, will we disagree with Heidelin? Will we be like, no, we're not going to take your moon ship. We're going to go and try to stop this. And then there's obviously the bit of me that's like, well, this is a JRPG, and they really do have a thing about killing God. So I'm even wondering, could Heidelin even turn into a villain? Or something like that by the end? Because ultimately, Vana we understand, but Heidelin is a primal. We know what it's like with primals. And then, of course, Medion. You spend so much time basically just thinking, Medion, protect. She must not feel sad. She is nice. And, poor Hermes is sad, and look how sad that makes her, and you're thinking all of those things. And I suppose that's because Medion is supposed to be a very appealing personification of, the overall Medion system, which is, all these sisters and the shared consciousness that they have. So, it's one of those things, Medion is almost like empathy hacking us in a way. But what's it going to be if she's basically out there somewhere, who the hell knows where, but she's out there somewhere, and it's just 10,000 years of despair? Will other dark things have been found? That's a question. We're talking about other stars, other civilizations here, aren't we? And that has me thinking, post Endwalker, what's it going to be like? What will the narrative of 6.1 be? So all these things, they have got my brain on fire, frankly. I love not only the experience of playing this game, but the experience of thinking about this game. And this has actually been something that's been a bit of a journey for me, because I'm so used to just, you play your thing, you see what you get, you enjoy the experience, you think about it afterwards, obviously, but I suppose I'm beginning to become like a little bit more slow and intentional and precise. There's times where maybe you could be so taken by the spectacle and the stakes and the very simple, characters that you really love, that perhaps some of the more intricate cosmology you'll miss out on. And that certainly happened to me once or twice. So it's looking back at things, examining, thinking about them. And I suppose what I love here is, it's not like, sometimes there's other games that get very deep into the lore, but they don't have the other things. In this, it's like loving the characters, loving the journey, loving the spectacle. That's all there as the main course. But then diving deep into everything else is just this beautiful follow-up dish. And I think we can all see how in Endwalker, there is so much more of that. So much more of that, and I'm absolutely, absolutely loving it. So, man, what a treat. You know what, even just getting to finally see the real Hythlodaeus, I'm like, man, I like you. Oh, where are we going to go? The next 2 levels are going to be absolute madness. So I am going to get to max level. I can't wait, because tell you what, you see Matt, he's about to explode. He's about to explode. He's begging me to get finished so that we can do a spoiler cast on it. So I cannot wait. That's it for me. If you want to support the channel and also immerse yourself in some tasty Japanese snacking, you can check out the Boxu link down below. Thanks to them for supporting the content. Thanks to you for watching it. And I think I have a bit more end walking to do, so I'll go do that. Have a great day. See you later.